Shalom, I'm Nama Rue. This is my husband, Rabbi David Rue. We are continuing to discuss the laws of the Shmita year. And I wanted to ask you, how does technology around agriculture factor in to the practices that are permitted or forbidden in Israel?
Well, this is a very interesting question. Ritzi Pesach Frank is the Rav Yerushalayim for a long, long time. In his Shilas and Shuvah's Hartzvi, says that he has been in doubt for a long time whether if you plant the way we do it in, as he says, Mizman האחרון, in the later times, that you take a wagon that's pulled by a yoke of oxen, right? And the wagon is filled with seed that is then spread through a mechanism in the wagon onto the field, as through the walking of the oxen. Is this the Av Melacha, or is it a Tolda on Shmita, or is it not prohibited by the Torah at all? I mean, perhaps the only thing the Torah prohibits is seeding in the way they seeded in the time of the Tanakh.
Planting with your own hands, with a trowel.
And he says that he saw that the Chazon Ish, in his commentary on Mוציאה, says that it doesn't matter how you plant, right? It's liable. And it doesn't matter how you plow. Meaning, in the time of the Gemara and the Mishnah, Tanakh, they used oxen to plow. It was about 1,000 years ago that they figured out how to make the horseshoe, which really made it possible to use horses to plow. So did that change things? And he says it doesn't matter. Right? Whichever one of these things are done, the Chazon Ish argues, as long as you're achieving the result of planting, it's prohibited. So Rav Frank quotes this, and then he says it's still not clear to him. In the commentary on Shulchan Aruch Magen Avos, it talks about harvesting. And there is a difference between the way you harvest. You harvest with a scythe or you harvest with your hand. And so does it matter which way you do it? So he says it does. And for one you're liable and one you're not liable. So too, the Magen Avram talks about grinding grain. They used to only grind grain using a hand mill. If you use a hand mill, you're liable. But water mills did not exist in the ancient world. And so he says if a Yisrael stands there with a water mill and throws, the stones are being turned by the river that's turning the paddles that turn the stone. The Yisrael, the Magen Avram says, can throw the grain into the mill all day long, and he hasn't violated Shabbos.
Wait, can I just recap really quick? So you're saying, as long as you're not planting it with your hands or grinding it with the hand mill, then even if you are intentionally getting a seed in the ground to grow, or
we don't have that with Shabbos. We've talked about harvesting, that the Magen Avos says harvesting with the hand is permitted, although harvesting with a scythe is prohibited.
Okay.
And the Magen Avram says grinding with a hand mill is prohibited, but grinding with a water mill would be permitted.
So it's I didn't do it with my hands, I just secondarily threw the grains.
I didn't do it in the way the Torah prohibited it.
Okay.
All right? That's what he says.
Or can you get a non-Jew to do that for you?
That would be an entirely different thing. If you arranged it before Shabbos, then there's no melacha of the Jew on Shabbos.
Okay.
So that's a different issue.
And then they can give it to you.
it's not simple. It might depend on where it is. If it's in a place where a Jew could see it, it would be prohibited. In a place where a Jew couldn't see it, it could be permitted. But we're going way off what we're trying to discuss here.
Let's get back.
So, in the end, Rav Tzvi Pesach Frank, he says he's still not sure, because we know there's a comparison between Etzet Shabboson by Shmita, Etzet Shabboson by Shabbos. So if these things, if we accept what the Magen Avos and the Magen Avraham say, then if I change the way from the classical way of doing it, it might not be a Torah prohibition. In this case, it might be permitted also. He's not pasking that way. He's not saying one way or the other, but he is opening the possibility that it could be. And the Chazon Ish is saying not at all. He's saying what's important to us is what comes out of it. If the result is the field is planted, that's a Torah prohibition. We're told not to plant. Now, there's another way of looking at it also, which is not 100% clear, or it could be both ways. And that is the prohibition on me against working the land, or is that the land shouldn't be worked? Mm-hmm. And the difference is, for instance, the Rambam paskins that if a non-Jew plants tomatoes during the Shmita year and he harvests them, he says we're allowed to buy them and use them. The question is whether they have Kedusha Shvis. Meaning, if you would say that the only issue is whether this is permitted or prohibited work, and since it's permitted work for him, therefore it doesn't have any sanctity of Shmita, we could say the land's supposed to rest. Whatever the land produces during the Shmita year is the sanctity of Shmita. Is it a din in the land or is it a din in the person? So again, if we look at this machlokas, it's not really a machlokas. The statement of the Chazon Ish is the land has to rest. If the land isn't allowed to rest, if the essential pa'ula, the action of planting the land has been achieved, then I don't care how it happened. In fact, the land is not resting in this way, and therefore it's prohibited. Rav Tzvi Pesach Frank is saying it's what I am doing or not doing. If the animals are pulling the cart, even if I'm telling them where to go, that has nothing to do with me. If the tractor's driving, and nowadays, of course, there are these advanced tractors that are GPS. You give them the parameters of your field, and you send them on to plant. They do everything on their own. So if I do that,
but you programmed it.
I programmed it last year. I programmed it before the Shmita.
It's kind of like there's an automatic sprinkler. It's okay.
That's right. And we can do all that. So according to the Chazon Ish, it wouldn't matter. And Rav Tzvi Pesach Frank says, I'm not sure. It could be that according to Rav Tzvi Pesach Frank, according to the opinion, the side that he's unsure, it could be that it's mutter to have your tractor do this, and the fruit still has the sanctity of Shmita, or the vegetables, whatever grown out of this, would have the sanctity of Shmita. That's a possibility. One doesn't eliminate the other, but this is a problem. This unclarity of Rav Frank's is a problem that will run through several issues that we're going to come up with as we go on studying the agriculture of things. And of course, the Chazon Ish is 100% sure. And the Chazon Ish had a huge amount of indulgence, as did Rav Frank, over what is done in Eretz Yisrael. And in Bnei Brak, there's certainly always accept the opinion of the Chazon Ish, whether it's strict or lenient. Other places, different places in Eretz Yisrael, some follow the Chazon Ish, some don't follow the Chazon Ish. But he was very, very influential concerning these issues. So we have to consider this point as we discuss different aspects of work in the fields over the course of the Shmita.
Okay. Thank you.